All right, everybody, welcome back to Thursday's Theology. My name is Jeff, and I'm your host. And if you're new with us, we've been taking the last month off just because we've had some um, time off just to reevaluate and to get some new ideas flowing and stuff like that. And we're starting back in August. This is Thursday's Theology 2.0. And what I'm really excited about is the series that we're going to get into for the next few weeks is one called Summer with the Saints. And the reason why I wanted to start this whole series is because I realized that growing up as a Protestant Christian, I really wasn't exposed to the lives of the saints. And I think that there's a lot of really good things that we can learn from the lives of the saints because, they lived in time periods that were really radically different from ours, and they lived lives that were glorifying to God. So I wanted to explore that a little bit. But knowing that I have no idea what the lives of the saints were like, I decided to invite one of my good friends, Jake, to come in and tell us a little bit about the lives of the saints. So I want you to go ahead and welcome with me my friend Jake. And Jake, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jeff, for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I just want to get a little bit of background of you. So who are you? What's your name? What church did you grow up in? If you grew up in one, et cetera, et cetera. So take it away.
So full name, Jake Taylor. I was born and raised in Paso Robles, California, just 2 hours north of here in Santa Barbara. Growing up, my background historically is Protestant, but I wasn't raised in the church by any means. I like to say I was brought up culturally Protestant just because it's very much part of our family history. That's who we are, but I wasn't raised in any particular religious function. Then starting in middle school, I had what I still call an awakening, where I had a desire for faith, really. I remember really looking at the model of Moses and Abraham kind of stood out to me in particular. Just these great men who did great things motivated by their faith. And I wanted that for myself. And that led me on an exploration of the various Christian denominations. And all the while, I was slowly drawn more and more and more to the Catholic faith. Everything about it really drew me to it. The ritual, the beauty, the tradition, the rich history of it, and especially the lives of the saints. Those were, one of the biggest things that drew me in the vein of the saints was that I had very clear guidelines of how to live my faith, and that I really, really liked. So eventually when I was 14, I was baptized into the church, and I've been practicing ever since. I entered the church at Old Mission San Miguel, which is a little town just north of Paso Robles, one of the 21 missions here in California. And again, I've been practicing ever since. College, though, was really where my faith took off in a really, really radical way, and that was thanks in no small part to my involvement at St. Mark's University Parish in Isla Vista, which, if you're familiar with UCSB in Isla Vista, it's just Party Central. But in the midst of that, we have this unbelievably thriving parish with so many young people actively striving for holiness, and it's really made my own faith life just increase at an exponential rate.
Yeah, and that's great that you mentioned St. Mark's because I had the honor of going to Mass with you one time, and it was the first time that I'd ever been to a Catholic Mass, and I think in my mind I was expecting, all of the old ritualistic approaches to faith, but I was really, really surprised with how there was ritual, yes, but it wasn't for ritual's sake. It was because there was such a clear love for God's word and for the practice of, just living out the faith. So I really appreciated it. The reason why I wanted to have you on our channel is just because I have been so blessed by our conversations with you. I think there's been several conversations we've had that have started, as, hey, I have a quick question about Catholicism, and that has grown into like an hour and a half long conversation.
Yep.
So it kind of sparked the idea of having you come on and just talk to my viewers about the lives of the saints. So the main question I have for you in this intro episode is why do you think it's important that we study the lives of the saints?
Right. So in Catholic circles, there are millions of copies of Lives of the Saints, just books written about the lives of the saints. And something that within Catholic circles, Mother Mary Angelica, who founded EWTN, the Catholic TV channel, she she said she really didn't like a lot of the lives of the saints that were written because they made the saints completely unattainable, and that does happen a lot where you read a lot of lives of the saints, and it's like they were perfect, and they and some of them suffered horrible things. I mean, pretty much all of them did, but the lives always make it seem like they were always perfect, they never sinned, and all that stuff. But if you look at the reality of it, every saint is a sinner who, and there's actually a beautiful quote from Saint Jose Maria Escriva that I really love, is a saint is a sinner who never gives up, or something to that effect. So one of the biggest things about studying the lives of the saints is that they are our big brothers and sisters in Christ. They've gone before us, and they've done it successfully. So they've left behind a model of how do I follow Christ in each situation. Excuse me. And they looked to the scriptures, they looked to the sacraments, to the Virgin Mary, to all these things. And it can also be very good because, as Christians, we're called always to strive to imitate Christ. But, the question can be raised, well, how do I do that when 21st century California looks completely different from first century Galilee? But we can look at these examples of how the saints have imitated him throughout their various time periods across the planet.
And that's a really good point, because I was shocked when I got to seminary. One of the books I read was St. Augustine's Confessions.
Right.
And I think I had grown up with this misunderstanding of, like you were saying, where the saints were like, oh, they were perfect, godly people.
Right.
But just hearing about Augustine's younger years, I was just like, man, this is not the holy guy I remember.
Nope.
So yeah, and I think there's so I mentioned it before on this channel, but my absolute favorite band of all time is Switchfoot, and they have a really good line in one of their songs that says, every saint has a past and every sinner has a future.
Absolutely.
And I think that's an important thing to highlight, because when we look at the lives of the saints, we can often be almost discouraged, would you say?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And especially the model of my personal patroness, St. Therese of Lisieux. She's one of the most popular saints in the church. But she's very often one of those people who's like, well, she was totally perfect. How can I relate to her? But if you read her own personal writings, you see she was just like the rest of us. And, that was something she talked about over and over and over. She's saying, of myself, I'm weakness, I'm nothingness, I'm littleness, but God, who is infinite love and mercy, he's the one who's lifting me up and doing all this great work.
Yeah. So what do you think that, what would you say to someone like me? So I'm a Protestant, I was raised in the Protestant church, don't have a lot of knowledge or exposure to the lives of the saints.
Right.
If I were to come to you and say, like, hey, I'm interested in studying this, where would you guide me to start?
Well, I would kind of recommend getting a copy of Lives of the Saints. There's millions of them, and even though it might be kind of one of those editions of, they were totally perfect, never did anything wrong, at the same time, it makes them unrealistic. It can also be very inspiring to see what they were able to rise above. So I always put that as a good starting place. But at the same time, I think something I always encourage is reading the actual writings of many saints. There's over 30 doctors of the church, and a doctor of the church is someone who has provided a corpus of writing that has significantly contributed to the church's understanding of some aspect of the faith.
Okay, so would Augustine be one of them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Augustine is one of the doctors of the church, and I would absolutely recommend someone read him, especially the Confessions. I myself have read part of the Confessions, and what stuck out to me when I read them was he's very funny, and I don't think he means to be.
Yeah, definitely. I picked up on that too when I was reading through. I was just like, I feel like he was writing to me in a 21st century sarcastic tone. Yeah. But then I wrote just like, wait a second, I don't think he actually meant to be this funny.
Yep.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, so you mentioned doctors of the church.
Yes.
Can you name like 4 or 5 of us for us, just so we have an idea?
Yeah. So originally, the 4 Latin doctors in the Western Church are Augustine or Augustine of Hippo, Ambrose, Augustine's teacher. Who else? Gregory the Great, and shoot, I can't remember. Jerome, Saint Jerome. And then over time, there's been various other people. There are currently 4 women doctors of the church. So Therese of Lisieux that I mentioned before, the famous mystic Catherine of Siena, the other famous mystic Teresa of Avila, and Hildegard von Bingen, also a mystic and just an unbelievably talented and polymath and just an exceptional woman, especially in her time.
Nice. Okay, awesome. Well, thanks again, Jake, for joining us. And for you viewers, we're going to take the next few weeks, and each episode is going to be dedicated to a different saint, and Jake's going to kind of take us through their history and what they meant to the church and their lives and stuff like that. So I'm really excited for this series. And also, another announcement for you. We are going to be accompanying this series with a podcast. Because we realize that sometimes 10 to 12 minutes isn't long enough to talk about things. So we're going to be, Jake is going to be joining us for an extended podcast. We'll link to that below so we can watch, or you can listen to that. We're just going to be talking a little bit more about the lives of the saints. So thank you for joining us this week. My name is Jeff. My guest star is Jake. And remember, theology doesn't always have to be difficult. It is simply the study of who God is. Take care. We'll see you next week.